Hi again, and welcome to this episode of the Astrology of Family Karma and Relationships podcast. I'm Alexander Mallon, your host, and once again, I'm really pleased and lucky to have our wonderful co-host, Doctor and theologian and astrologer, Dr. Peter Lanzillotta. So, Peter, thank you for joining us again today, and welcome.
Well, I'm always pleased to work with such a distinguished friend.
Well, likewise, back at you, dear Peter. Peter
And
is.
I already know just from this topic alone, we could have a whole series on Catholicism, heresy, the development of popes, leaders, you name it, but we could combine uniquely and well into presenting all the various contrasting and complementary views.
Well, today's program, of course, is happening, this program on April 21st of 2025. And our program today is about, Pope Francis, who just passed today. And
Mhm.
we have a little slide presentation to help us get into
Yes.
that with charts. But yeah, Peter, it's so true. I had contemplated folks having, a few slides around some other important spiritual leaders that we've had these days, Thich Nhat Hanh and here, an American guru, Ram Dass, who passed not many years ago. So,
And and like it or not, the Dalai Lama is 88 or 89.
Dalai Lama also is getting elder, and it seems to me that we're in a cycle, and those are some slides I wanted to discuss too. But we'll do it another time, Peter. We're at a turning point. I mean, listen, we all know we're at a turning point of history. We are absolutely in
Uh,
2025 at a major turning point in history. I've been telling my
Now,
clients.
it may not completely manifest until 26, when the air sign change is permanent and that energy of earth and water shifts to fire and air. And hopefully, we will be able to redeem that masculine energy and use it for the betterment of humanity rather than the patriarchal system.
Well, and we will discuss that. Peter and I, we had done another a program a few months ago that people can find us on my YouTube channel and on podcasts. We'll talk about that in a second. But we were talking about a very important occurrence astrologically, where Neptune in the last 4 weeks, early part of this month of April, ingressed or moved into the sign of Aries. So the beginning of Neptune and Aries, a fire sign, Aries. So Neptune shifting signs, and the next
Yeah,
planet out,
out of its home sign that it was so comfortable in to a place where idealism catches fire
ah,
or delusion takes us into flame.
there is something else I was planning actually before Pope Francis passed away this morning. I was considering today doing a program, uh, Neptune moving into fire sign Aries, where Neptune in the last 19 years has been in the water sign of Pisces. We had lots of flood events and tsunami events, as we
Mhm.
all know, and drought events. But now Neptune moved into a fire sign. And locally in the eastern US, at least, we are seeing another phenomenon of the inspiration or the lighting of the fire of Neptune, ideological lighting of the fire, another version altogether.
Yeah,
People setting forest fires. That's been another sudden phenomenon. To the few weeks that Neptune moved into fire sign Aries, we are having people setting forest fires these last
and,
number of
and,
weeks.
and the other corollary is spreading drought because we're heating up the planet so much so that the water of Neptune is evaporating in Aries.
We'll have to return to this one. This is called geopolitical mundane astrology, looking at planets astrologically and what they symbolize about the environment. That is exactly true. Those two phenomena about Neptune coinciding with Neptune moving into the sign of Aries. Again, I want to say I always practice, Peter, by saying the planets aren't really necessarily doing anything. That they are road signs. The road sign doesn't make the road
They're
curvy.
corollaries of
They,
what's happening.
they are the the astronomical cycles are correlated. There's an interweaving in everything.
Mhm.
There's certainly, if nothing
That,
else, is a
that of
correlation.
course is one of the great criticisms of skeptics. They say the planets aren't causing. No, no really good astrologer is going to say causation, but we're going to say correlation or synergy or synchronicity.
Astrologer, psychologist Carl Jung's idea of synchronicity. Right. But there is just in nature, I say to every client, if you're a woman particularly, wherever the moon is when you're born, 29 and a half days later, it returns it right where it was. Women know their moon cycle after age 12. Is the moon
Yeah.
doing it? Maybe yes, maybe no, but nonetheless, it is a perfect correlation. And that's what astrologers study, these correlative cycles. So
Okay.
let's
Now
get to our,
I'm going to jump from that right into my favorite book by Pope Francis.
uh,
His famous book on
oh, oh,
ecology and human life and how we have to respect nature as one of the main expressions of spirituality.
amen to that.
Mhm.
So true. I mean, we have one planet, although there are people who continue to think of a terraforming Mars. We clearly are going to populate, we are going to have a physical moon station on the moon soon for a lot
Yeah,
of geopolitical reasons.
I don't believe that's a plan B. I really think that all the money being spent on outer space is ludicrous.
Well, you and I share that. One of my childhood heroes, maybe yours too, Carl Sagan,
Yeah,
was a big promoter of the Planetary Society. The Planetary Society, whose mission is to create spacecraft and orbiters and things that we do send. I mean, I'm all for science and sending probes to Pluto and to Jupiter and mapping and photographing is all terribly interesting and robotics now. But
yeah.
I am I am I
The-
am totally against sending humans anywhere except for rebirthing our planet here.
well, it's just that the millions or the billions, uh, you know, yes, scientific research, but why not forestry and management of the oceans and climate change? That's where the emphasis has to be.
Clearly, clearly, yes, without question. Well, let's get into our program
All
specifically here,
right.
folks, and do our
We're
the
very
focus.
good at tangents.
Oh, we're great. Well, I've got a strong Neptune. Yeah, we can just go there. So today's show again is a spiritual remembrance of Pope Francis the First, with Dr. Peter Lanzillotta as my host, and we're going to discuss his chart and his life, and a little bit about who he was, the man. So before we even get there, let me also remind people who are watching on YouTube, please do go to my Apple podcast and my Spotify podcast. Please subscribe, follow. I'm really a fairly new show here. And for those computer algorithms to know that I exist and show other people that my program is out there, I need as many subscriptions as I can to enable the algorithm to say, "Oh, Alexander has a podcast. Oh, we can list that for people to check out regarding astrology." So please do subscribe and follow my podcast. That helps me get this shown on those algorithms and let people join our program in the future. So a little bit about our guest, Dr. Peter Lanzillotta, a fantastic astrologer, a fantastic healer and counselor and life coach. One Spirit Coaching, right? That's your website. I'll list it later, Peter. Peter's also authored, published a number of books.
Right,
It's
right.
even
And coaching has reflections, sermons, my bi-monthly moon reports, and other things.
well, thank you, wonderful. I love Peter's quote here, folks. Astrology allows me to
So,
state what I believe about each of you, that you are all heroes and heroines in the most important story you'll ever read or known, the story of your lives. So I love that quote, Peter. So here we have two beautiful photographs of
thank
the
you.
dear Pope Francis the First. So thoughts, Peter, you of all people, you're the perfect
Mhm.
astrologer, a professor of theology, a theologian, a reverend in your own right. Tell us, share with us some of your thoughts and reflections, if you would.
Well, Francis was a one of a kind, hopefully to be repeated, but maybe unique. He was the first one from the Americas. And so the perspective of coming from the Americas as opposed to coming from Europe makes a distinct difference because of how the Americas' history with Europe was about colonization. And he, taking on the healthy alternative, focused much of his ministry on the plight of immigration and on the tiered system of capitalism and government. So he was a great emissary or a great advocate of taking care of the poor and the marginalized and the people who didn't fit into the system. And so he became very quickly after his ordination as a Jesuit, so many other popes were princes of the kingdom.
Hmm.
And you see in the way he handled his his papacy that he stayed a priest of the people. The formal definition of a pope is Pontissimus Maximus, a bridge builder
Hmm.
between heaven and hell, I mean, heaven and earth, and between humanity and God. And I believe that he lived it as well or better than most in the papacy, and I would have to say in Christianity.
By the way, if I may interject, it didn't escape my attention that I think just yesterday, I believe that the Pope met with J.D. Vance. So when you were saying heaven and a bridge between heaven and hell, it was
Well,
my cynical Capricorn mind was going there.
okay, well, some on my website, people have made a comment saying the last person he met was J.D. Vance. And my response was, well, that was probably his last exorcism.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, those
And I
people.
hope it takes.
Some people accuse me of being, politically one way or another, clearly more to the left. Most astrologers are politically left, not politically right.
In order to have a worldview that includes all of these possibilities and correlations and syntonies, of course, it has to be a wider view.
And unfortunately, well, we'll get into it. We've gotten into it in other programs. Peter and I did a wonderful program about major cycles of 2024, 25. We'll certainly revisit that, Peter, those major cycles of Pluto and other factors
And
that
we
are
can talk
important.
about the popes who were astrologers.
Uh,
You know,
we should totally talk about the popes who were astrologers because you and I both, you were Italian by inculcation and breeding. I'm Irish, Irish Catholic. So the issues of the papacy, have certainly molded our childhoods and our lives. More so,
were
especially Reverend Peter.
I'm not going to say they were front and center, but they were constant companions to the obligation of going to mass.
And for
And he was always held up as Papa or the Heavenly Father, for all the pros and cons of toxic masculinity versus enlightened, caring fatherhood, the priesthood and the papacy are examples of both.
Yeah, indeed. But I mean, as a person who, when I was very, very little, age 6, age 7, my first Saturn square to Saturn. For all of us, age 7 is the first Saturn, the principle of maturation and coming to self-awareness. At age 6 and 7, I realized for me, well, the elements of Catholicism, like the Vatican treasures, and yet the nuns who sacrifice and give all, these seeming hypocritical, contradictory factors were distressing, and for me,
Well,
Catholicism was
eh,
difficult early on.
well, you were precocious in that. It hit me in adolescence, and so maybe that was my first Jupiter return 12 years later. I started opening up and reading all the material that wasn't necessarily condoned by the church. And I always had a voracious curiosity to know more about things. And of course, the more I learned, the more dissonance I had with the
Indeed,
party line.
yes.
My first pope, or my guiding pope, was John the 23rd. That was to usher in so many advances and changes. And, in some ways, it's still maturing, 60, 70 years later. But at least there was a crack of the ice of this frozen patriarchy. And along comes someone like Francis, who really was living the change.
He seemed to me, as a person who was disaffected with the church myself, he seemed to me to be well, true, a spiritual descent, a spiritual arrival for the Catholic Church, a 21st century Pope.
Well, again, from the Americas, not from that stodgy European mindset that was reinforced by all the elderly cardinals. And in his time, he has appointed more bishops and cardinals from Asia and Africa and the Americas. And I'm wondering how they will influence the election of the next pope.
Ah, fascinating. Yes, of course, I understand. So,
Now, beginning to tie in the astrology, from what I've always learned, the two signs that seem to occupy the most interest or concentration of spirituality and religion were Sagittarius and Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces. Not that the other signs are devoid of it, and not that we have strength and leadership, but by and large, when we're looking for religious leadership, we're looking at Jupiter and Neptune, and or Sagittarius and Pisces.
So we have the chart data here for folks who are listening, not seeing us on YouTube, for Pope Francis. His birth date, December 17th, 1936. We have 9 p.m. in Buenos Aires, Argentina, for Pope Francis. December 17th, he is a Sagittarian, and he's only on December 17th, mind you. He's only there at the tail end of Sag, just before early Capricorn. Capricorn and all signs typically change
Okay.
sign on the
And
20th or
and that and
21st.
that is the Leo decan of Sagittarius.
Uh-huh.
Leo's leading into leadership.
So his sun at 20, you're saying, Peter, his sun at 25 degrees, in other words, from degree 20 to degree 30, the end of the sign of Sag, where his sun happens to be, from degree 20 to 30, we have what's called the decan, or the 1/10th division of the sign that happens for all signs. So 0 to 10, 10 to 20,
Mhm.
degree 20 to 30. And each degree of the zodiac, don't forget, for those of you that don't know astrology, pertains to, or connects to, correlates to a day of the year. We have a astrological chart, the whole zodiac, 360 degrees, 360 days. Okay, with 365 days for our
Give or
Earth around
take.
the
Yeah.
sun. But with astrology, it's pretty damn close to 360. So 1 degree per degree of the zodiac. So if you are born with your sun at the 25th degree, as Pope Francis was, you're born that last 10 degrees of that sign of Sag, that's 0 to 30 for each sign, 0 to 30 of Sag. The last 10 degrees, that's where Pope Francis had his sun at 25, almost 26 degrees. And that was brilliant, Peter. You just said that last 10-degree marker, that
And that
decan.
last decan takes on some Leo qualities.
And Leo would be, well, how would you
Mhm.
characterize the Leo
So
quality?
if we just looked at his sun, yeah, if we just looked at the sun, we see a propensity or a an attraction to religion, philosophy, the higher mind, and then being in the Leo decan, that you would be led toward leadership in those areas.
And what's interesting, that Pope Francis at the 9 p.m. time given has a Cancer rising, an Aquarian moon conjunct to Venus. So a Cancer rising, an Aquarian moon, and a Sagittarius sun. That Sagittarius sun almost only 4 degrees, 4 days from being a Capricorn sun, from being December 21st, which is linked to the pagan holiday, the Christian pagan holiday. In other words, the darkest night where you
Yeah,
light the candle.
Saturnalia and
Saturnalia, but you light the candle, right? You light the flame of
yeah.
the hearth of the home and the candle that symbolizes spirit, the sun rising again, the winter solstice. He's born just 4 days from the winter solstice, which is arguably the most spiritual day in the year for Judeo-Christians.
Uh, it is the most interior energy. If you follow someone like Rudolf Steiner and the energy flow of the zodiac around the year, we have right now, we're in the spring, which is the beginning of the opening of the energies. Uh, Francis was born at the almost complete closing down of the energies into a concentrated ball of both darkness and possibility, potential, and the beginnings of growth.
Which again is his birthday, December 17th, almost December 21st, days away, the winter solstice every year, the darkest, the longest night of the year, and the night that you proverbially light the candle.
Listen, I have a tangent for you.
Please,
I have Cancer rising, and I have the sun in Aquarius and the moon in Sagittarius. So rising.
goodness, wow, that's I would like
So
to plop up
maybe
your chart there. So let me just restate it because your signal's breaking up for a
that's
moment.
a reason for my affinity toward him.
Well, let me restate that because you broke up signal wise for a second. So you and Pope Francis
Oh,
share a couple of powerful themes. You're both Cancer risings. He has a Sag sun. You have a Sag moon. He's an Aquarian moon. You have an Aquarius
right.
sun. So your charts are practically parallel. And of course, you yourself nearly became a priest, and you became a reverend and a theologian, a professor of theology.
Well, I became a
Brilliant.
priest too,
Yes.
but later in the dissenting Catholic Church, uh, the independent Catholic Church,
Well, we're gonna have a
because I wanted people to be able to reach deeply into Christian mysticism and not throw away all of the Western tradition because of the oppressive guilt, sin, patriarchy, but to know that the mysteries and the mysticism is really the soul of Christianity.
Well, I'm gonna have to have a program just interviewing you and your most interesting and formidable,
Okay,
wonderful life.
that's enough of a tangent.
Well, but nonetheless, the spiritual piece is what we're getting at here.
Okay, Alex.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Peter.
Well, the expansiveness of Jupiter, but into Capricorn, so it would be an expansion of the foundation of the rules of a status quo institution.
So Capricorn's the institution. Yes, that's what you're talking about.
So he would have made his mark. So he would have made his mark in trying to turn the ship of Catholicism into a more expansive and growth producing direction. Maybe not as much as he would have wanted, and certainly not as much as many of the Catholic laity would have desired, but he tried to apply the impulse of being a spiritual person and place it into the organization and try to shift the status quo forward even a little bit is significant.
Well, certainly, we were discussing and prepping for the show, not only that he is, as I call it, he is he's a Capricornian-ish Sag. His Mercury in Capricorn and his Jupiter in Capricorn conjoined to each other. Mercurial verbal communication, Jupiter, we call in Western astrology Jupiter the planet that symbolizes spirituality, philosophy, and in Vedic astrology and in Tibetan astrology, they don't call Jupiter Jupiter by a Greco-Roman name. They call it Guru.
All
They
right.
they refer to Jupiter as Guru. And
Teacher. Yeah.
Peter, whenever I see a prominent Jupiter in a person's chart, I oftentimes think about Oprah Winfrey. She's got a prominent Jupiter. I call her a guru. She's a guru figure. Here we have the planet Guru in Vedic astrology, Jupiter called Guru. We have Guru conjoin the Sun and conjoin the North Node, Node, the North Node of the Moon. The North Node, for lay people in the West, we consider it the part of Dharma, one's karmic dharmic mission, one's
Right.
dharma, one's spiritual mission of this incarnation. It says his dharma is connected to the essence of his being, his sun, the spiritual essence of his
Mhm.
humanity, and
So
guru.
it's almost like it's almost like he couldn't avoid it.
Well,
You
it
know,
said
destiny
destiny got
grabbed him in
yeah.
this triumvirate of Node, Sun, and Jupiter.
Well, and this chart says
And even though he may have trained himself to be, pull was clearly a devotional pull to the religious life. And one of the reasons why he chose the Jesuits, and he is the first pope to be a Jesuit, was that emphasis on intellect and service.
well, of course, service, it doesn't escape us, those of us who are students of astrology. His sun Jupiter North Node, Jupiter, his guru, planet guru, the sun, and the North Node are all conjoined in Sagittarius. The Jupiter is just barely in Capricorn, almost in its home sign of Sagittarius. So it highlights again the guru spiritual path that he takes in this life. In the sixth sector, the sixth house of his chart, and the sixth sector, sixth house of the chart is the house of Virgo, a house of service.
Daily routine.
Well, but it's more about service, is it not? It's
Mhm.
service. It's service to others. It's where that
Yeah,
sixth house. Yeah.
and often and not just service to others, but often the disenfranchised and the people who don't have quote unquote the even break.
Yeah,
You
by
know,
all by all
that
means.
polarity uh, with his south node in the 12th house, says that he would be a spokesperson for the underprivileged, the confined, the people who were the anawim of our culture.
Mm, beautifully said, beautiful remembrance and acknowledgement. I use people who don't know me already will be surprised to know that I, as a backyard astrologer, I'm really at the eyepiece every clear night that I can. I look at a chart through that, no pun intended, the lens of astronomy. And for me, I look at that 24-degree south node in Gemini in the 12th house and that 10-degree ascendant in Cancer. I look at them as conjunct. I see that south node as conjoined or near that ascendant point. And therefore, it says, I think about Martin Schulman and his great book on the nodes. For those of you going way back decades into the 70s, when Martin Schulman did a groundbreaking book on the moon's nodes,
Yes.
I believe one of the things said for a south node ascendant conjunction is something to the effect of that no one individual will
Yes.
possess me or have me.
I have I have all three books by him.
I think that one interpretation Schulman
I
gave. Go ahead, you're breaking up a bit.
yes, I I read all three of his books on the things of that sort. So I want to validate your potential connection there because of Schulman. And also just there's something about the South Node of the 12th house that always resonates with me.
Well, one would say the south node in Western astrology, we call it the point of karma, and the north
Yeah,
node opposite the point of dharma. They invert them in Tibetan and Vedic
yeah.
astrology in their meanings, where the north node is the point of karma and the south is the point of dharma, kind
Oh,
of.
I didn't know.
But the West, we look at the south node as karma, or I call it habituation, or soul attachment, or
Right.
egoic.
Where the learning has to happen.
Well, it's also kind of collectively from whence we came, where we came
Yeah,
from.
yeah.
So this
What we've
implies
carried in from past lives.
this implies that when we the South Node ascendant conjunction, the ascendant being the identity, Carl Jung called the ascendant persona.
Yeah.
So it says there's a karmic theme that no one will possess him or have him. No one can have him. When the south node conjoins the ascendant, no one can have me or shall have me exclusively to themselves. There's a quality of always holding back from a survival place that I
Yeah.
cannot let go of my full self to any other partner, any singular person. And that's a
Mhm.
general theme of South Node Ascendant. The spiritual, of course, is that I identify myself with those who have sacrificed self or have no voice or are institutionalized or don't have a voice in the societal culture. He has Pluto, therefore, also, I say, conjoined his ascendant loosely. So there's a South Node ascendant Pluto, a dynamic here, which says, my sense of selfhood is ego-less, and my sense of purpose is larger than the self, larger than my own individuality.
And to enhance that, Pluto also is so generational that it's very possible that Francis was to be a generational leader, not just an individual of his time.
A voice of, well, when Pluto is at the angles of a chart, we see, for instance, Pluto midheaven conjunction in the chart of Reverend Sun Young Moon of the Moonies.
Uh,
Dictators and dictatorial figures or leader figures or magnetic figures oftentimes have Pluto angular in their charts, as Pope Francis did. Now,
I know we're catching up on time here, but do you want to say anything about that Uranus at the top of the chart?
I was going to just ask you what your thoughts about Uranus, because Uranus is the planet that rules his moon and Venus in his birth chart. So, what are your thoughts about that moon, that Uranus? Whoops, sorry. There we go. What about that Uranus in the chart? What are your thoughts?
Well, and we've been aware of this for a long time recently because Uranus has been in Taurus for what, 7 years or more, and how difficult it has been to express the Uranus qualities of freedom, discovery, advancement, invention, uh, and Taurus saying, no, 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 stability, security. Let's not take any risks here, and let's work on the status quo. So it's been a challenging dynamic. Now, as it relates to the papacy and to his open-hearted quality with the Venus that desired to lead others in a way that gave them the security of faith. So the Taurus part is the security, and the Venus part would be the faith. But
So,
it wouldn't be a legalistic one. It would be a compassionate one. And as I spoke to you earlier, that Aquarius is not an intimate sign. It is a humanitarian sign. It is a sign of relationships for the ideal of humanity, but not in the idea of one-to-one intimacy.
and
And so,
well,
so,
yeah.
oh, go ahead, Alex.
Well, I was just going to interject that the way I practice astrology as a astronomer, backyard astronomer, astrologer, I look at his Venus conjunct his moon in the sign of Aquarius as Venus moon in a wintertime sign, conjoined to the wintertime planets of Saturn and Uranus. So above the horizon, the planets that he has are all in, except for Uranus, they're all in signs of, including his sun sign, of the community. Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces are wintertime signs. And the wintertime period is about the collective, the need of the collective, not the need of not springtime, summer, the need of the self or the expression of self in springtime, summer to create. But wintertime signs are about the need of the collective. Whether a winter storm is hitting our neighbors or the old lady down the street or whatever, it's about the collective nurturance of others, not of the self. And he has his Venus moon in Aquarius, the wintertime sign of composure, collected, intellectual. It's Aquarius is an air sign. It's mental, emotional. It's a fusion of mindful
Okay,
awareness
so
of others.
in Francis's case, it would it would be in Francis's case, it would be the community of believers, the church, and the larger vision or purpose of the church as God's home on earth in that way, or that it's your rightful place. Leave individuality behind because individuality is in some ways the enemy of community because
Individuality
community requires mutual sharing and unselfishness in order to reach an ideal goal.
individuality is the opposite of the social communal need, is what you just said. It has me thinking about President Ronald Reagan and
Well,
Aquarius.
yes, you do not build, you do not build, you don't build an empire, you don't build a large congregation, you don't build a force in society based on individuality. It's based on common values, shared ideals, unselfish dedication, and a devotion to that is larger than oneself.
So his conscious light of spirit, Sagittarius Sun, almost Capricorn, born in the winter solstice or just near the winter solstice, the night, the longest night, the night of spirit. Some astrologers refer to the winter solstice as the portal of exit, when souls or beings exit the earthly realm, versus the opposite, summer solstice,
Well, it
the birthing
isn't
of
the
souls.
collect, if I remember right, what they call the Galactic Center, isn't that in the end of Sagittarius?
Indeed, it is. Literally, our Milky Way galaxy has its hub, its black hole, its galactic center at that 26 degree, 25, 26, 27 degree of Sagittarius. That is exactly where his sun is, 25, 26 Sag at the galactic center. That's right on. Also, too interesting, as you said, his moon sign is Aquarius. Those two signs, Sag and Aquarius, are about the spiritual, the community and the communal. And Moon rules his ascendant Cancer. Sun is co-ruler of the ascendant, the first house of his chart. He has a 10 degrees Cancer rising and an 18-degree second house cusp by Placidus houses. So 18 degrees of Leo is in that first house. His first house is governed by the moon and the sun rulership. And his sun is in a sign of spirituality. His moon is in a sign of spirituality. So, people have said to me, Peter, if you had the chart of Jesus Christ, if you had the chart of the Buddha, if you had the chart of Paramahansa Yogananda, could you tell a spiritually ascended person from adult, from a person who's asleep? This chart is a classic chart for, at its best, a high caliber human being, right?
Yes, we may not be able to do it in black and white, but
Yes,
we surely can see the potentials and the possibilities of it unfolding in the way of spiritual leadership.
indeed. So let's
Well,
go. Yeah,
I remember doing a conference with astronomers on the birthday
yeah,
more than being born in December for
yeah.
Capricorn.
My apologies, because you broke up again. Could you just restate that real quick?
You want to? Hmm?
You just broke
No,
up. Could you just restate that quickly?
because of how the calendars have changed over the years and how they've added months and subtracted days and whatever. Uh, Jesus didn't have a, Jesus was not born on the 25th. Uh, that is a date that the church fathers chose to coincide with pagan gods Mithras and Saturnalia and other times when they were celebrating the dark of the earth or the rebirth of the sun.
Which is
And so,
the winter solstice,
yes,
the longest night of the year, the lowest sun in the sky of the year above the equator, the
but
winter
there were
solstice.
competing deities at that time in the world.
Yes,
So that's one of the reasons why they put it there.
it's a it's a
Whereas,
pri it's a primary reason, in fact,
yeah, the primary reason.
why they have Jesus born on the 25th.
Whereas his actual nature that we can see in the Gospels is much closer to a Pisces person than it is to a Capricorn person.
Indeed, thank you. Let's go if we can really quick, since we just had Pope Francis pass away today,
Yeah.
April 21st of 2025. Let's look at a couple of quick charts. We will look at the death chart, the
All
transits of
right.
today for sure. But let's just go quickly to those progressions. For people who know astrology, a little more advanced astrology, there are some really interesting things with the solar arc directions for Pope Francis' chart. Namely, the solar arc Pluto has progressed from its birth position to progress to by solar arc direction. Solar arc directed to almost 28 degrees of Libra, square his natal Pluto. The progressed midhaven or career angle or social angle, his social being,
Right.
who he is in the world, has solar arc directed to his Pluto. Number one, number two, death cycle. So Pluto square Pluto, midheaven to Pluto, those are two potential death cycles. Pluto being Alpha Omega, life and death and rebirth. The number three is his progressed sun is square his natal sun. The number four,
And trying that Pluto.
that's exactly right. Trine the Pluto, but also the progressed sun square the natal sun while that solar arc Pluto is square the natal sun simultaneously. That's the fourth
Right.
cycle. When we look at the secondary progressed chart, we have the secondary progressed sun at 25 of Pisces, conjunct by the year, the secondary progressed Saturn, also at 25 Pisces. So those two came together at 25 degrees of Pisces. The death chart of today has transiting Saturn North Node at 25, 26 Pisces. So this is what an astrologer would see.
And of course,
Yeah,
his lungs,
it's major
the
coincidence.
Pisces quality of the lungs could have been the cause of death.
Well, pneumonia, well, fluid,
Fluid.
Neptunian fluid. But we do have his birth chart again, which says he has, whoops, sorry guys. He has a Sag Sun in the sixth
Right?
house of health,
Yeah.
opposing a 12th house of Gemini. The 12th house in medical diagnostic astrology what do you call it?
Arms, hands.
Well, no, forgive me.
uh,
The 12th house itself rules not chronic or acquired conditions, but congenital. That's the word I'm looking for.
oh,
So,
okay.
so
All
his
right.
Gemini in the 12th house of Francis' chart says congenitally, he inherits congenitally Geminian afflictions, risks,
And
physical
he had
fitness,
lung problems from a early age.
and the lungs specifically. We know that Gemini rules the lungs in medical astrology. So it says, congenitally speaking, he may come in with lung issues or have congenital lung concerns, which is, in fact, what took his life, these last months of
I,
pneumonia.
let's go back to the death chart for a minute. Uh, when different astrologers will disagree, but I see the square as being more difficult than the opposition.
I, you
Well,
know, I agree with you, by the way. They say in tradition, folks, that the planets that are opposing or by transit or planets that are in opposition to each other are the most difficult aspect. I completely agree, Peter. I think I disagree totally. I think squares are much more difficult than oppositions. That's how I read it. And you're saying the transiting Neptune, eclipse cycle North Node, Saturn, on his natal
all
Saturn,
squaring his
square
sun.
his sun this
Yeah,
year is in the eighth house of death, by the way, is
yeah,
the signature by transit of the potential of his health or his well-being being at stake.
that's the way I would read it.
I
Uh,
would I would read it the same way, but check it out that transiting Saturn 25 26 Pisces, the eclipse cycle 25 26
now,
Pisces.
and there is something about Saturn that talks about completeness, like you've reached the end, you've done your work in this lifetime. Uh, you don't need to go any further. And how do I say this without sounding like a naive fan? Uh, Dying on Piccolo Pasqua, or what is known in the tradition as the Little Easter, the day after, seems so right that he completed his time at the height of the church, at the height of the celebration.
Wow. Thank you for informing us and looking at that connection, a coincidence. I was going to comment that since Pluto rules life, death, and rebirth, these immediate years, Pluto has been opposite his natal Pluto. That would be another
Okay.
major death signature. That
Yeah.
transiting Mars and Pluto have been opposite to each other for 4 or 5 months now, since
Yeah.
essentially Thanksgiving time of 2024. Mars was retrograde, And so Mars just changed signs only a few days ago, 2 days ago, one or 2 days ago.
Mhm.
And on the day that Mars, having been direct in motion on his ascendant, opposing his Mercury, comes to his Pluto, within days of Mars coming to his Pluto, not only, well, he has a few visitors there at the Papacy, one American vice president, but he also has that address to the to the congregation, to the people for Easter. He actually holds an Easter ceremony. Did he not
Mhm.
before he passed?
Yeah, well, again, there is just this sweet idealism of completion, that he wanted to talk to his people one more time
Well, that's
before his soul left in the dove.
yeah. He all told he was open to the people. He was open to the concerns of the many. He was open and minded to the LGBTQ population. He was inclusive. He did try to, in his own way, reform the church. Did he not? I mean, what can you share about
And
that?
and in the spirit of Francis, you know, I know we have to close, but in the spirit of, I would say he was the chief religious ecology advocate.
Hmm.
And in his book, Laodicea, he talked about how important it is for all religious and or spiritual people to also be ecologists and warriors protecting the environment and the climate that affects us all.
Yeah, for me astrologer, for me as an art therapist, for me trained in art therapy, for me as a hiker and a naturalist and an avid bird watcher and as an avid astronomer, I see God in the world. I see God in everything, not only in everybody, but I especially see God, Great Spirit, in this beautiful, this incredible creation. As an astronomer, how do you not look through the eyepiece at star clusters and galaxies and planets and moons of planets, and how do you not see God? The hand of God, so to speak.
And he was one of the great advocates of that intimacy, that oneness, and that soulful connection that we have to life.
Well, Peter, it's delightful to have you. I wanted everyone to please be aware to go to your website, which is one-spirit-coaching.com, onespiritcoaching.com. Dr. Peter Lanzillotta, astrologer and theologian. Please, maybe in parting, let people know about your books and about what services you provide.
Well, I have a specialty in spiritual coaching, spiritual life coaching, and interfaith spiritual development or soul work with people, where we work together as soul friends and companions,
Wonderful. Well,
helping you to find your own best answers.
so onespiritcoaching.com, Dr. Peter Lanzillotta. Peter, you're marvelous. There's so much more, right? We can listen to Peter all day. There's so much for you to share, educate, to uplift us and have us be more awake. So thank you so much for your presence and for your time today. Thank you, folks, for listening and watching. And especially look for future episodes where I'll have Peter as a very honored guest and so many things for you to share, Peter. I want to continue connecting, involving, and gaining more of you and from you. So thanks for coming. Have a
Uh, I
great,
would be I would be glad to participate because
yeah.
uh, the more we can break down barriers, we will be popes in our own life, making bridges to higher realities, to justice, compassion, and love.
Well, love and hugs and wellness to you. And namaste to you, dear Peter. And namaste to you, folks listening and watching. And We'll see you again at the Astrology of Family Karma and Relationship. Blessings. Take
All
care.
right. Bye-bye.